Disney. Is there any potential conflict of interest between Disney, which is a fairly large corporation, which has lots of interest, and ABC?
No, both are fantasy land.
Yeah. Second is, who owns CBS? Viacom. Now, who owns NBC? Comcast, which is trying to. So it's just this huge conglomeration of power. I want to bring this back to Colorado Springs. In 1946, Hoyles bought the Gazette and the Telegraph. He merged them. I don't know the exact history, but it was, and he didn't like unions. And hold on, I thought I did it. I need to just walk over here. And there was a strike, and they created the Free Press in Colorado Springs. Hoyles made a statement that you could not use the term public schools in his newspaper. Do you know the term he mandated to use?
What?
Taxpayer-supported schools. Okay. Hoyles campaigned against the public library. Right here in this building. Unfair competition with bookstores. Okay. People, and I don't know who it is, but I think it was the Noises, basically made the argument at Chinook that public libraries were like the drug dealers who give out free drugs. And they wrote a letter and a campaign, it was somebody saying, public libraries aren't competition. The more public libraries usage, the more private bookstores sells. But just the concept. Hoyles did lots of really good things. I mean, he had some issues but he has an opinion. Ted Turner at CNN outlined the term foreign. No foreign people here, international. Okay? I don't like the term foreign. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but words have meaning, and they have ramifications. The Time magazine did a big piece on Hoyles, and one of my things, that it was the Unitarian minister downtown, right here, and they were talking about he's for prostitution, which didn't go over really big in Colorado Springs. He's for open borders, which, I mean, he's a true libertarian in lots of different ways. And he created an institute called the Freedom School up in Black Forest, which was tied into the John Birch Society to train editorial writers around the country. But the Unitarian minister during the strike, and it was a violent strike, said, they say Hoyles has a Stone Age philosophy. This is 1946. That's an injustice to the Stone Age. But Hoyles was of Colorado Springs. He was an individual. Let me tell you what's going on, and this is why we're a typical market. Right now, in 2003, a guy in Colorado Springs named Tim Hoyles said, I've had enough. He was a family member. He and his family owned a little over 8%. He said, I don't think freedom is run right. Family members, it was no longer a family business, it was run. So he decided that he was going to force a sale of the company. He tried, he got traction. They decided to finally hire Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or something to put the company out, to explore all options. The result of this merger was that Dean Singleton, the owner of Media News, made a public bid for Freedom for $2.45 billion, which is real money, okay? This is when newspapers were at 30% profit. This was 8 years ago. It was huge money back then. Instead of selling the whole company, because monopoly newspapers were so profitable, they decided to buy out shareholders. And so they said anyone can sell. It's not exactly clear, but it looks like 35% of the shareholders, 35% of the shares were sold. That was $750 million. They didn't have it, so they went to Blackstone Investments and Providence Equity Partners to meet investment bank hedge funds and borrowed $750 million 2003. The problem with it is that everything seemed fine as long as they made the payments. But if they didn't make the payments, there are all these covenants, which I don't think anyone understood. And so, as a result of Freedom, all of a sudden newspaper revenue going down. The Gazette was still very profitable, but they didn't have enough money to do it. The Orange County, that they became in default, and the Freedom was controlled, instead of being controlled by family members, it was controlled by these two board members, the two investment bankers. They hired somebody, Scott, I forgot his name is, but he was there. He ended up leaving to go to become, now he's CEO of Playboy. But it was a good move. He left there. But then, these two investment banks, they didn't keep the money. They sold their shares to a syndicate of 26 banks, 27 banks. So, no, sorry, 37 banks. These 37 banks owned the loans. Well, when Freedom went bankrupt, because it wasn't because they weren't a profitable company, it was because they leveraged, they borrowed, they didn't do things correctly. All of a sudden, these 37 banks owned Freedom. 104 communities, 104 newspapers. Gazette's the second largest. Mesa, Arizona was the third largest. Freedom bought it for $80 million. They sold it for $2 million 8 years later. Okay? Because it was badly managed. It was badly managed because the people were clueless. The Gazette, and this has nothing to do, this is typical, since I've been publisher of The Independent, they've had 8 publishers. They've had 24 editors, general managers, or sales managers. It's a chain. You can't be, they're not of the community anymore. But the problem is that right now, there are 3 companies, 3 newspaper companies in bankruptcy or about to become out of bankruptcy. One is Freedom, which is out of bankruptcy. One is Media News, which is out of bankruptcy. And the third is the Tribune Company, which used a huge leverage buyout, crazy employee stock thing to borrow, and they're going to come out of bankruptcy. These 37 investment banks, it's a little longer story than this, have sold all their shares to 4 companies, 3 vulture media hedge funds, and JP Morgan Chase. So they own all these, they own 350 papers around the country right now. We are trying to bid and buy the Gazette. I'm not sure we want it, but we're trying to bid. We have John Street, who's at 3 Fortune 500 companies. We have Goose Gossage. We have the money to be able to bid to buy the Gazette. But they won't sell it to us. What they're going to do is they're going to sell the TV stations outright. They're going to sell the Orange County Register outright. And then they're going to sell their companies in conglomeration. These 3 companies own over 50 properties in California. One person's they're going to play monopoly, and they're going to create consolidation, but they're not going to create local ownership and people of the community owning it. I like Hoyles. He was of this community. He lived here. He was part of this community. You can speak to him. You can't speak to people who are not of this community. So our danger is that we are having what has happened to TV stations and radio stations. Who knows the business journal on Wachezak? He said, I can't meet your margins. We're still profitable. So Dolan got him out. And they hired somebody, and then they've hired somebody else, both from outside the community. A great local business journal is a big asset to us. It kept us on our toes at The Independent, probably there. But now, the business journal's in trouble because it's absentee ownership at its worst. And it has ramifications because newspapers, even in this day of the blogger, they provide the basis of information of what's going on for the blogosphere, in my mind. So my concern is it's not just The Independent won't be able to buy, and I think we're the only city, or one of the only cities that has a second newspaper. Most of these cities have just one newspaper because they're smaller weeklies, they're smaller cities. They're going to have these new people, these investment bankers are going to take over this. No one on the Freedom Board has any newspaper experience. None. Not one person who's worked on the Freedom Board has ever worked at a newspaper.